Welcome back, sleepyheads. I'm glad you found your way here tonight. Before Silas steps into frame, a word from the voice behind the clock. You know, the one who winds him up for these slower, quieter journeys. I chose Verona on this night because it's where love stops asking for permission and becomes legend. It's not loud, it's not careful, but fragile, impulsive, and eternal because it doesn't last. This is a city holding its breath between footsteps and whispers, where romance lives in shadows, balconies, and borrowed time. It's the perfect place for a quiet walk. Here, history doesn't rush, it leans in close and sighs. If you enjoy drifting through love stories that linger long after the lights go out, ease yourself into the sleepy circle. Like the video, subscribe, stay a while. Let's begin.
Chapter 1 Gates of Destiny. Welcome, listeners. I'm Silas, your slightly sleep-deprived tour guide through time. If you enjoy my whispering through history's bad decisions and beautiful moments, tap like, subscribe, ring the bell, and tell me where you're listening from. I promise I won't climb your balcony. Unless you're in Verona and your family hates your boyfriend, then I'll just leave flowers and run. Now breathe in. Let your shoulders drop. We're stepping into a city where love glows like candlelight and knives glint just beyond it. The year is late 16th century. Verona is wide awake beneath a velvet sky, caught between pride and poetry. Let's begin. The night opens with a hiss of wind through the ribs of Porta Borsari, the Roman gate that has been watching people make questionable choices for 2,000 years. Torches spit against the cold and paint the carved Latin letters in bands of copper and coal. Frost clings to the marble as if the empire never really left. The stones hold their breath like veteran soldiers at inspection. I stand at the threshold and listen to Verona breathe. The air is wine and winter, fermented sweetness undercut by the ache of the adage. Somewhere behind the gate, a mule stamps, iron shoes ringing. A tavern door bangs. A lute hiccups a chord and thinks better of it. The street beyond is a soft canal of shadow where lamplight pools like gold coins. Every window promises warmth. Every corner promises a witness. I take my first step beneath the arch, and the sound is swallowed whole, as if the gate eats modern footsteps for sport. On the inner wall, somebody has scratched a heart with a knife. The clumsy geometry of it cuts me a little. The letters inside are not R and J, but they might as well be. Verona breeds initials the way gardens breed bees. I touch the cold groove with a gloved finger and murmur, "You two still together?" The stone doesn't answer. It has learned to keep secrets. A draught slithers along the archway, creeping up my sleeves with the fine manners of a thief. Torches crackle. I move through, into Via Mazzini, where the city tightens into a polished corridor, narrow and eager. Tonight the paving stones shine with a slick skin of frost, a mirror that refuses to get the facts straight. There's a perfume of crushed rosemary and wet leather. Shutters blink sleepily. Balconies lean forward like old dowagers dragged reluctantly into gossip. For half a block it's only me, my breath, and the patient eyes of statues tucked into niches. Then Verona turns and shows her teeth. They spill from a side street. The midnight patrol, halberds crossed to herd the night into good behavior. Lanterns sway and smear light along the walls. Steel glints like a smile you don't trust. Their boots drum a rhythm so steady, my heart sinks to it against my will. A man in a dark cloak hesitates where two streets kiss. He answers a question too slowly. The batons. Crack is clean and wooden, like a broom handle snapping in winter. He folds in on himself with a sound I feel in my ribs. I step off the main lane, quick and soft, into an alley glazed with rain and spilled wine. The stones here tilt and misremember level. My shoulder kisses damp plaster. I fold into the shadow the way a thought folds into a whisper. Lantern light licks the mouth of the alley, searching. A patrolman's shadow reaches long and thin between the walls, a narrow, fingered darkness. I hold still. Even my heartbeat tries to tiptoe. Their muttered questions and grunted answers pass so close I could count the threads in the captain's sash. If I had a death wish, one man's breath smells like garlic and victory. Another's armor creaks with the soft complaint of old leather. A lantern pauses at the lip of my hiding place. Heat kisses my cheek. Smoke writes a brief gray script in the air and erases it. It's always the same, I murmur, letting the breath barely move. My lips. Power fears what love dares. The shadows crawl on. The drums of their boots recede down Via Mazzini until they're swallowed by the long quiet. I slide out and back into the city's bloodstream, pulse uneven, a little more aware that I was born with exactly one life, and it is not refundable. Verona has impressed her weight on me, heavy, watchful, unyielding. She's not a city. She's a chaperone with a sharp eye and a longer memory. I drift forward under a balcony where vines have cracked their winter knuckles and retreated. Only the black lattice of stems remains, like the staff lines of a song that forgot its notes. The house beyond is stone thick and alert. Behind its shutters the night hums. A command here, a laugh there, a hush like the stiff hem of etiquette dragging over a floor. Two servants cross a tiny courtyard with a cask slung between them. A cat rides the wall and pretends not to judge anyone. A church bell far off taps out the hour as if it doesn't want to wake the saints. Verona is a labyrinth designed by a poet who owed money to a mason. Via Mazzini tightens, releases, tightens again. A slow pulse between merchant houses. Shop awnings sleep like folded wings. At the far end of the street the city gives itself away, a lace of music torn by the wind. I follow it to the corner, where a cul-de-sac yawns, warm as a mouth, lit more brightly than propriety recommends at this hour. The masked ball's hangover lingers. The Capulet household sits in the middle distance, lit from throat to crown, windows leaking laughter like champagne. The music is muffled now, a waltz unbuttoned and trying to sit up. Voices tumble out and break on the cobbles. A gout of candlelight spills over the lower balcony, gilding the frost into false summer. The air smells of oranges and hot wax and expensive impatience. A velvet half-mask lies in the gutter. It's crushed, the satin petals ground into an ugly flower by a careless heel. Beside it, a glove, the kind you lift to your face before you say yes. Someone has written their night and left me the punctuation. I pick up the mask, turn it in the torchlight, and set it back down. It gleams weakly, then surrenders. Above, a giggle floats out and down, lands on the stone, and shivers. For a heartbeat, I swear I can hear another sound braided into the laughter, the breathless hitch of a boy piling his entire future into a single look. Romeo would have been here not long ago, eyes bright, name heavy. He would have slipped along this very wall, the night a cloak. He would have crossed this square with the clumsy stillness of a thief, trying not to wake his own conscience. On the balcony beyond, a girl would have leaned into the dark, her face a pale lantern, her voice trying on the dangerous shape of honesty. Lovers are architects who build bridges out of seconds. A servant staggers through the door with a tray of emptied goblets and stale cake. He pauses, yawns so fiercely his jaw threatens mutiny, and sets the tray on a barrel. The pearls of wax on the candle stubs look like a rosary that lost faith. He spots me, just a figure at the edge of the light, and squints with the suspicion cultivated by people who have cleaned up after rich men's fun. Cold night, I say, quiet. The universal peace offering. He grunts agreement and pulls his shawl tighter, which in Verona is a gracious invitation to mind my business. I incline my head and return to the anonymity of shadow. A minute later, someone inside shouts for more wine, and the servant vanishes like a coin behind a magician's knuckles. The street narrows again. I slide along the wall, fingers brushing the gritty skin of the city. My hand comes away powdered with lime and thyme. A set of steps shears off to my left, plunging into an alley where the frost has taken a vow of silence. A stray dog noses the crushed mask, considers attending the party, and decides against court politics. Behind a shutter, half a block away, a harpsichord finds the outline of a melody and holds it like a bird. Then, somewhere on the neighboring lane, quick, soft, a window opens with the tiniest kiss of wood on wood. The hush that follows is not emptiness. It is loaded. A murmur, 2 notes, just enough to recognize a human voice lifted halfway between fear and invitation. I stop breathing without being asked. It's not them, not this time. It's never them when you ask for it. But the air remembers. Even the mortar remembers. If you listen with your bones, you can hear the balcony words, the alchemy of them. How a name becomes a costume. How an oath becomes a door. I stand there far too long, staring at a shutter that refuses to confess, and feel foolish in a very specific, historical way. Down the street, a drunk weaves out of a side passage, humming a tune that can't decide if it's sacred or profane. He bows to a lamppost with elaborate courtesy and announces to the night that he is in love with the idea of love. "Get in line," I whisper, and he does, right into a doorway where he decides to sleep off both poetry and wine. A chill threads through the hem of my coat. The patrol again, fainter, farther. Their lanterns bloom briefly at the next corner like sickly orange flowers, then withdraw. I measure my breath to the beat of their boots and wait until the cadence dissolves. Verona is a city with a curfew that eats excuses. I come to a small shrine set into the wall, Madonna behind rippled glass, her paint cracked into fine porcelain rivers. Someone has left a sprig of laurel and a slice of quince on the ledge. The fruit's scent is unexpected, like a laugh in a funeral parlor. I light one of the thin tallow candles with a match that flares vulgar and noisy in the quiet, then hushes into steadiness. The little flame makes a small parliament of shadows behind the glass. I think of Juliet, 15 and sharper than the knives the city keeps polishing. I think of the way her words cut through her name as if it were paper. If I could leave her an offering, it would be something heavier than fruit and lighter than advice. I settle for a breath. At the far end of Via Mazzini, a gust sweeps the street clean. The way a stagehand sweeps up confetti after a performance. The frost flashes and dims. A carriage rattles past with curtains drawn, and the clip of hooves that suggests someone inside wants very badly to be adored and not at all to be known. The driver doesn't look at me. I don't look at him. We have an agreement to keep our mysteries separate. Behind me, the Capulet laughter thins, then tightens into reprimands and instructions. In the wake of a ball comes the accounting. Who danced with whom? Who spoke too long? who is now the subject of a sentence that begins with "we must." Houses have their own politics. Hearts have their rebellions. Tonight those two nations will negotiate with candlelight and headaches and a sudden inability to sleep. I drift onward, boots whispering over the slick stone, and the street opens greedily. Piazza delle Erbe waits ahead, but that's for another hour. For now the last stretch of Via Mazzini holds me like an inhale. A single glove remains in the gutter beside the crushed mask, pale and delicate as an unanswered letter. I picture a girl climbing the stairs, fingers tingling from cold and proximity, bare hand pressed to her lips, because there are not enough locks on a mouth when a certain kind of boy has stood beneath your balcony. Above, a shutter shifts. The faintest line of lamplight cuts the dark, then vanishes. Good girls' windows become observatories on nights like this. Guard your constellations, I think. They'll be called evidence in the morning. Somewhere a bell counts the hour again, slow, reluctant. I imagine Time himself trudging through the streets in a too tight doublet, muttering that love always makes his job harder. He'll be right before dawn, as usual, and disastrously wrong by midnight tomorrow. I pause where the lane narrows to a seam. It would take only one step to wedge myself between wall and disappear. Romeo took a different step, the foolhardy one forward, eyes on a balcony and a future. He traded his family name for a moment of certainty. People call that reckless. I call it arithmetic. He added everything and got one. Sometimes one is worth it. The wind picks up and slips 2 fingers down the back of my neck. I laugh, low and breathless. Yes, yes, I tell the night. I'll keep moving. The city approves with a small clatter somewhere, like a bead falling off a dress. Behind me, the patrol's last echo fades into the maze. Before me, the marketplace dozes with one eye open. Between them I walk, soft-footed, spine humming, a trespasser in a story that has been told so often the stones know their lines. Verona feels alive but dangerous. Every shadow could be a lover or a soldier, and sometimes they are both. I keep to the edge of the light, where secrets learn to speak in a whisper. Come closer. Keep your breath quiet and your heart louder. We've only crossed the gate and slipped down the lover's path. Ahead lie the market's whispers, the courtyard's lullabies, and the long, thin line where romance and ruin hold hands and pretend not to notice. Chapter 2. Whispers and blades. The city loosens its corset as Piazza delle Erbe emerges, long, elegant, and almost empty. The market stalls pulled tight like sleeping ships. Lanterns flicker in crooked halos, and every puddle is a fractured constellation. Orion with a limp, Venus smudged by a cartwheel, 1,000 damp heavens laid underfoot for anyone reckless enough to step on stars. A stray lute stutters from a balcony, 2 hopeful notes, a third that breaks its ankle on the night, then silence. Verona's way of clearing her throat before the next rumor. I pass beneath canvas awnings slick with dew. The air is herbs and rind, rosemary bruised under heel, fennel seed, the faint vinegar of yesterday's wine flung in temper. A line of cabbages slumps like bored bishops. The oranges huddle for warmth, glowing like arrested suns. My hand slides along a stall rail, wood gone satin from a century of bargaining. Coins once rang here like little bells of fate. Tonight, only the lanterns ring, their metal frames ticking as they cool. Movement tenses the alley to my left. The sound is small, leather scuff, breath caught, a whisper bitten off, but it travels the bones of the square like a rumor sprinting home. Then, metal, a crash that slices the quiet in 2. I pivot and the alley opens its teeth. Two figures, a Montague and a Capulet, by the cut of their coats and the way the hatred fits them like custom tailoring, slam together in a fever of knife-bright steel. Blades chatter, high, breathless, obscene. Sparks spit into the dark like fireflies with anger issues. A chair goes down. A crate explodes into slats. The fight has that special urgency of men trying to carve their family names into each other. I drop into a crouch behind a cart of spoiled fruit, the air waking with a sweet rot that clings to the back of the tongue. Pears slump into themselves. Figs gape obscenely. A peach leaks its summer onto February stone. The world narrows to lantern glare on steel and the raw music of iron on iron. Their feet grind grit. Their oaths steam. Honor, I whisper because I can't help myself. Verona's most overrated export. The taller one lunges. The shorter pivots and rips his blade across a sleeve. Cloth screams. Blood beads, bright as garnets, and then the alley gets serious. The tall one presses, the short one yields with awful grace, the way a dancer yields to a step he hates but must perform. They lock, the hiss of breath, the grunt, the animal sound of men wagering mortality on a wrist's angle. The short one feints left, goes right, and the point kisses a throat, not deep, just enough to remind everyone that skin is a shabby door. Blood sprays in a fine arc and freckles the wall beside me. It patters onto the spoiled fruit with a blasphemous little applause. The scent of iron rises. Hot coin, wet lock, a key turned in a ribcage. Lantern light ripples. The fighters freeze, panting. Somewhere in the square, a shutter snicks shut very softly. The sonic equivalent of "we saw nothing." The tall one swears in a voice already thin with future regrets. The short one lowers his blade an inch, mercy or inventory, hard to tell. Then both back away, step by step, until the alley swallows them in opposite directions. The darkness exhales. I stay crouched a beat longer, because dignity is cheap and caution buys tomorrow. When I stand, my knees creak like an old chapel pew. I wipe a red constellation off my sleeve with the corner of a burlap sack and give the cart a grateful pat. You saved me, mold, I tell the pears. The pears accept my thanks with rotten composure. The square resumes its practiced innocence. A cat flows along a parapet, tail a question mark. Far off, men laugh the way men laugh after they've decided not to kill each other today. The lute ventures one more note and retires from public life. I cross the piazza, boots whispering over stone that remembers better markets and worse mornings. At the far edge, a narrow passage funnels sound into Piazza dei Signori, Verona's courtyard of shadows, where power sleeps with one eye open. The buildings lean in like conspirators. Arches stitch the air into ribs. Dante stands in the center on his pedestal, carved mid-glare, as if he's just read the minutes and found them morally insufficient. It's colder here. The wind walks like a magistrate, straight-backed, disappointed. Lanterns burn blue at the edges. My breath pearls white and drifts toward Dante, who disdains fog as he disdains everything that isn't a tercet. At first I think I'm alone. Then the dark edits itself, and I see them, a man and a woman scraped from the shadow behind a column. Their closeness is a geometry of trouble. Her cloak is thin. His hand is not gentle. They're already mid-argument. I catch the tail of a sentence as you catch the hem of a dress rounding a corner. Her voice cracked on the rack of feeling, his slick with the oily confidence of a man armed with excuses. Names hiss, old as the city, sharper than the knives in the alley I just left. Please, she says, and the word breaks like porcelain. Please, he mimics, an acid little theater. What would you have me do? Betray blood? I've heard this scene too many times. Love trying to negotiate with lineage, a duel fought with pronouns and obligations. He is all future conditional. I would, I could, if only. And she is present tense, bleeding out. His hand leaps, flat and fast. The slap rings off the stone and keeps ringing. It hits the arch, the pediment, the bronze plaque. It climbs Dante like ivy and sinks its nails into every century. The sound is so purely ugly I feel my jaw lock like a door. She folds to her knees as if her strings have been cut. He stares down, astonished at his own cruelty, which is an old, boring astonishment, and then turns. The fog is kind. It swallows him in 3 strides. I do not move immediately. Some silences need to finish speaking before you intrude. She breathes, short, fierce pulls, as if the air itself were brambles. Her hand trembles toward her cheek, then falls. Pride's an expensive habit, and she's paying in installments. Slowly, as if obeying a rite whose steps are engraved into the city's marrow, she reaches into her cloak and sets a small candle at Dante's feet. Flint, steel. The wick takes with a sullen blue mumble, then brightens to a steady gold. The light combs her face, eyes swollen with salt, mouth set to "Don't you dare." The flame throws a miniature Verona onto Dante's stone robes, a city of soft light and sharpy edges. Even the poets look away tonight, I say, voice low, not quite to her and not quite to myself, her shoulders tense. She doesn't turn. The candle's light licks the cold bronze letters, then settles. I step back into shadow, a respectful retreat from a battlefield that isn't mine, not tonight. On another night I might offer a hand, a word, a scrap of borrowed courage. Tonight I let the ritual stand, a flame for mercy in a courtyard that prefers verdicts. I circle the square under the arches. The walls here have heard legislation and gossip in equal measure. They know that law and rumor are cousins who borrow each other's clothes. The colonnade breathes drafts through its teeth. Somewhere above, a court clerk snores into a ledger and dreams of geese on a quiet pond. The dream will be wrong by morning. A guard drifts past the far gate, bored, boots ticking. He glances in, finds only a poet, a flame, and a shadow that pays taxes, and moves on. Dante continues to stand and judge and say nothing, which is his way of saying everything. Love has walked here earlier in the evening, wearing a mask and expensive perfume. Now the blades come after it with receipts. Verona's romance is a veil stretched thin over centuries of blood, and the wind slips its fingers right through. I step back toward Erbe, the market breathing again like a house that thinks the intruders have gone. Behind me, the candle wobbles once, then steadies, a small spine of light in a body of stone. Ahead, the square widens, and somewhere to the south, a bell tolls one, slow, unwilling, as if dragged by the ear out of sleep. Onward, I tell my feet. The night is busy. The next street is waiting with a lullaby in one window and a knife in the other. Chapter 3. Bloodlines and Balconies. The wind threads a low hymn through iron as I step into the shadow of the Scaliger tombs. Gates groan like old judges waking to scold the century. Above me, stone knights ride eternity in full. Parade. Spurs frozen mid-jingle. Banners petrified. Marble hands locked in prayer that looks less like piety and more like a very late apology. The night breathes cold onto carved cheekbones. Even the gargoyles look like they're holding their breath. My footsteps click and answer themselves, echo stacking on echo until the courtyard is a small cathedral of the obvious. Power dies. and it insists on doing so impressively. I tip my head back, coffins in canopies, lacework of stone as delicate as frost, as permanent as rumor. Verona does grandeur like other cities do bread. Tonight it tastes like iron and gravestone dust. A ripple of noise presses in from the street. A stumble, a curse, the dangerous music of men pretending they're not about to do something stupid. The gate's shadow shivers. Then he arrives, exactly as the gossip columns of fate promised. Tybalt. He comes on like a storm in an expensive coat, sword already hungry for the part of the evening where it gets to be. Dramatic. Wine ghosts his breath. Rage straightens his spine. His hat is at that careless angle men use when they want to look immortal. Spoiler, no one is. Behind him, 3 of his cousins pour around the tombs like spilled lamp oil, fast, flammable, ready to take light from anything that sparks. Tybalt's voice slices the air. He spits a name, and though he doesn't say Montague, the syllables wear the family colors. His blade whispers out with that intimate little sigh steel makes when it thinks it's finally going to fulfill its purpose. I flatten against the stone, which is suddenly very convivial about sharing its chill. Every family needs a Tybalt, I murmur as they sweep past. A constellation of fury headed south. He keeps funerals in business. One of the cousins glances my way, eye like a flung nail, then follows the gravity of Tybalt's temper down the lane toward the Capulet house. Their footfalls taper to a threat. The tombs reclaim their quiet, which is not peace so much as intermission. I let out a breath, and it fogs in front of Dante's seasoned knights, who don't blink. The wind moves through the iron again, and the gate gives a small, offended shudder. Somewhere, a bell tries out a single note and decides it isn't worth the trouble. I slip back to the street's edge, letting the city reassemble around me. Verona's night is stitched with alleys so narrow even shadows have to turn sideways. Laundry lines whisper. A shutter blinks. The moon hauls itself over a roof like a tired acrobat and sets its chalky light across Via Capello, the thin ribbon that winds toward a certain courtyard, where it is always dangerously late. I walk. The stones here have a different gait underfoot, polished by centuries of feet practicing departures and returns. The air smells of wet plaster, boiled wine, and the kind of roses that grew up around arguments. I pass a baker's door cracked to bleed warmth into the street. A cat has colonized. The wedge of heat with proprietary purring. It eyes me with contempt, which I accept as the local custom. Midway down the lane, a door holds still and yet confesses itself. The apothecary. The wood is warped, grain like waves in a storm-tossed sea. Someone has hammered a dozen nails into it against a dozen different superstitions. A single candle works in the crack where warping has failed to keep the century out, its flame the size of a heartbeat, steady as a liar's gaze. The hinge breathes. The door opens just enough to change the temperature of the street. Inside, the light is the color of old brass and smells of fennel, spirit, and something that has died twice. Shelves lean under the weight of bottles whose contents look like alibis and accidents. A bony hand slides into the slice of night, palm up, priestly in its expectancy. Another hand, gloved, jittery, appears with a thin envelope. Coins kiss inside, a soft, urgent clatter. The bony hand withdraws and returns with a vial of silver liquid, moonlight trapped in glass. A potion, I breathe, unable to help myself. For courage? For escape? For forever? The gloved hand accepts the vial with the reverence of a new devotee taking sacrament. A breath, the smallest nod. Then the door closes with the modesty of sin. The candle vanishes. The street becomes only street again. I stand there, listening to the wood remember its shape. The sleepier parts of my brain mumble about cough syrups. The sharper parts count fates. In Verona, bottles come labeled in invisible ink. Remedy, poison, story. Often they're all the same. Another block. The night owns itself. Via Capello slants closer to its legend, and the city, dramatic old actor that it is, holds its breath right on cue. The lamps seem to lean forward. Even the pigeons go reverent. The houses tighten their shutters, as though modesty still applies. I think of Romeo, a boy whose name was a gorgeous inconvenience, tracing this very seam of darkness, every nerve strung like a lute, trading caution for the geometry of a balcony. I picture him with his ridiculous courage, pockets full of metaphors, the moon playing witness like a nosy aunt. He came here to spend everything he was on one look upward. He was rich in the only currency that never lasts. A window sighs open above me. A hand appears, slender, deliberate, and tips the day's last basin into the gutter. Water rattles down, glittering like coins you can't spend. The hand withdraws. Somewhere deeper in the house, a young woman's laugh blooms and vanishes, a perfume of sound that makes the century blink. I pass under it like a pilgrim through incense. My shoulder brushes plaster carved into vines. Someone has etched 2 initials there in a hurry, and then scratched them out even faster. Love and discretion, uneasy roommates. The closer I draw, the more the city simplifies itself to essentials. The lick of a torch, the rasp of a guard's cough a street away, the rill of a fountain that may as well be time itself, sneaking off to be alone. My footsteps measure out the old, unavoidable question. What would you risk, and what would you rename for a face at a window? A gust lifts the hem of my coat and carries a scrap of velvet past my ankle, a mask, fallen from a dance that thinks it has ended. It skitters, hesitates at a drain, then twirls once as if bowing to a partner, and disappears. The night applauds politely. I consider bowing back. Love chooses its weapon early, I say to the stones. Steel is merely jealous. I pass a small shrine set into the wall, glass clouded, votive drowned to a nub. Someone has stuck a note under the frame, a plea so private it might be a spell. The wax smells faintly of citrus and old church. I tap the frame with a knuckle. Thank you, please watch them, and move on. The Capulet Quarter announces itself not with heraldry, but with attention. The street is swept a little cleaner. The door knockers are just costly enough to feel like warnings. Far off I catch the echo of men moving with purpose, the aftertaste of Tybalt and his satellites, and tuck myself tighter to the wall. A guard's lantern sketches a brief cage on the cobbles, then passes on to imprison someone else's shadow. When the lane finally tips into the small arch that leads to Juliet's courtyard, the air shifts, warmer somehow, though the night is no kinder. It has the charge of a theater right before the curtain lifts, that humming expectation where strangers become witness, and witness becomes oath. Ivy clings to brick like a remembered embrace. The little balcony waits, stone lips parted to answer a prayer. I stop before crossing in. It feels correct to arrive and not enter. To listen at the threshold of a room, history has worn paper thin. Somewhere a dove rearranges its intentions. Somewhere a girl sits too straight at a table and pretends she isn't listening for footsteps outside her father's house. Somewhere a boy whispers her name into the seam where shadow becomes wall, and the wall allows it, because it too is only human. My hand finds the gate's iron, cold and honest. The tombs are behind me with their carved regrets. The apothecary's door is buttoned over a secret recipe for destiny. Ahead, the balcony is an altar and a dare. Verona gathers its breath and holds it like glass. On then, I tell the quiet, as if it needed my permission. Let's see what a name weighs when spoken up a wall. The night agrees by saying nothing at all. Chapter 4. Love and Defiance. The courtyard glows like it's been dusted with candle ash and moonlight. Juliet's house looks exactly how you'd expect the epicenter of doomed romance to look. Beautiful, fragile, and about 5 minutes from heartbreak. The walls are a palimpsest of desperation, love letters stuck under flaking plaster, coins wedged between the bricks like small, shiny prayers, wilted flowers drooping in. Defeat. Each one is an offering from centuries of fools who believed love might spare them. Spoiler alert, it never does. A vine climbs the wall like it's chasing forgiveness. Above it, the balcony waits, a small platform suspended between devotion and disaster. The moon has decided to make it a stage light, bathing the stones in silver so soft it could bruise. The air hums with the weight of memory. You can almost hear the sighs trapped in the mortar. Verona's ghosts are very chatty. I step closer, boots whispering against cobblestone, slick with the tears of tourists who came centuries too late. My hand drifts over the wall. The texture is warm despite the cold, maybe from all the touches, all the wishes that never came true, but still left fingerprints. And then, the night does that peculiar thing Verona loves. It slips sideways into its own memory. A door creaks. A lantern flickers somewhere unseen. And suddenly, she's there. Juliet, leaning out into the moonlight. The kind of vision that doesn't care if you believe it or not. Her face glows pale. Her eyes wet with something braver than innocence. She whispers into the dark, and though her voice is centuries old, it's as fresh as breath on a window pane. "Wherefore art thou, Romeo?" she says, not asking where he is, but why he has to be who he is. It's the universe's most poetic middle finger to the concept of family loyalty. Below there's movement, the outline of Romeo, heart and hormones wrapped in poetry. His voice rises, eager and reckless, the sound of a boy promising the stars he'll never outgrow them. They talk the way drowning people swim, desperate, clumsy, gasping between declarations. His words tumble upward, hers fall downward, and somewhere between them the air itself blushes. In that instant, I murmur, leaning against the courtyard wall, Verona forgot its wars. Even the stars leaned closer. It's not romance, not really. It's combustion disguised as poetry. 2 children playing with gunpowder and calling it destiny. And yet, for a moment I believe them. I feel it in my ribs, the miracle of being seen so completely. It terrifies you. The promise that maybe love isn't about forever, just the seconds that make forever irrelevant. The vines tremble in the wind. The girl above presses her hand to her chest, as if to keep her heart from leaping out, to meet him halfway. Below, the boy steps closer, almost within reach, almost safe. But the distance between them might as well be an ocean, and the waves are named Montague and Capulet. A shutter bangs somewhere deeper in the house. Juliet vanishes. The balcony empties. The courtyard exhales. I'm alone again, with the scent of crushed flowers and the metallic tang of prophecy. "Love," I say softly. "You magnificent idiot." I leave through the narrow gate, ducking into Via Scaligere, a thin alley strung between the ribs of sleeping buildings. The moon follows me, reluctantly, smearing its light along the stone. The street is quiet in that tense, theatrical way that makes you certain the next sound will be important. And then it comes, a soft scrape, metal on stone, the rhythm of shovels whispered through the dark. I pause at the corner and look. 2 figures kneel in the dirt outside the Capulet chapel, working by the shy light of a single candle. Their faces are half shadow, half exhaustion. The older man's shoulders move with the patience of someone who's buried too many secrets. The younger one pauses now and then to wipe his brow and glance toward the street, eyes wide with the kind of fear you can't confess to employers or priests. I step closer, quiet as remorse. The scent hits first, earth and incense, wet limestone and something faintly sweet, like lilies left too long in a vase. The candlelight trembles as if trying to hide the evidence. They're not digging a grave, not yet, but they're preparing the stage. Verona's tragedies are very efficient. They start building the ending before the lovers have even kissed goodbye. The shovel bites deeper. The older man mutters a prayer or a curse. With gravediggers, it's hard to tell the difference. I lean against the archway, folding my arms. Preparing the stage, I whisper. The play hasn't ended. It's just waiting for its audience. The younger one straightens, eyes darting toward the sound. For a moment I think he's seen me, but he just stares through me, past me, like the living sometimes do when they accidentally look too close to the future. They work on. Each scoop of earth lands like a heartbeat, the rhythm of inevitability. Somewhere nearby, the river sighs against its banks. A dog barks and immediately regrets it. The candle gutters and flares, throwing long, warped shadows that look like the ghosts of arguments. When they finally stop, they kneel side by side, tools in the dirt, and bow their heads. The younger man crosses, himself, with fingers that tremble. The older one just spits and mutters, "Soon." They rise, gather their tools, and vanish into the side street, their footsteps fading like lines at the end of a poem. I linger. The whole yawns before me, small, neat, almost polite. Verona's moonlight falls inside and turns the soil silver. I crouch, trail a hand through the dust, and think of the balcony just a few streets away, where promises were made under the same moon, while the ground was already being prepared to take them back. Romance, I say, brushing the dirt from my palm, the only faith that insists on writing its own obituary. A chill moves through the alley like an afterthought. I follow it. The Capulet chapel fades behind me, its iron door sighing shut. The sound echoes all the way down the stones, like applause in an empty theater. Ahead, the lane opens toward the river, where the night grows thinner, the stars less patient. I glance back once, and the balcony gleams, faintly between the roofs, a pale wound stitched in moonlight. Somewhere above it, I imagine Juliet sitting at her window again, whispering to herself that love will find a way. And somewhere far below, the earth listens, waiting. The night smells of roses and wet dust, the kind of scent that tells you beauty is only ever rented. I tighten my coat, tip my head to the shadows, and walk on, because in Verona, love doesn't end, it rehearses. Chapter 5. Crossings and Consequences. The Adige River moves like a thought the city wishes it hadn't had, slow, silver, and self-conscious under the moon. Mist curls along the banks, soft as silk, treacherous as memory. The street lamps above it flicker and bloom into halos, giving the illusion that Verona still has angels on payroll. I walk beside the current, and the night hums low, like a cello string drawn across regret. You can smell the river, cold stone, iron, and the faint sweetness of rotting leaves. The kind of scent that makes nostalgia feel like something you could drown in. The moon trembles on the surface, its reflection fractured by the current. It's a trick of light, but it looks like the sky is crying into its own mirror. I step closer to the edge and watch ripples devour each other, leaving only smaller versions of their mistakes. There's a philosophy lecture in there somewhere, but the air is too beautiful to waste on logic. Every ripple sounds like a goodbye. Every gust off the water feels like the sleeve of someone you used to love brushing past without stopping. Verona is fluent in that language, the poetry of almost. A dog barks once from across the river, then thinks better of it. The city holds its breath again. The night has gotten good at this trick. Silence so thick it starts to sound like a heartbeat. And then I see it. Up ahead, under the pale arch of Ponte Pietra, lies the wreckage of a carriage, one wheel sheared off, axle twisted like an accusation. The horses are gone, either freed or fled. The snow around it is churned into a slurry of mud and moonlight. Blood, still red, still honest, runs in thin tributaries toward the river. I step closer, boots sinking slightly in the thawing ice. The air is metallic. The scene is quiet in that terrible way aftermaths are. A single jeweled pin gleams near the broken wheel, emerald and gold, shaped like a serpent biting its own tail. The emblem of self-destruction, fitting. A handprint, smeared in blood, drags along the wood paneling before fading into frost. I touch the edge of the mark. It's cold. Everything here is. Someone tried to run from Verona, I murmur. But the city keeps its lovers close, even in death. The wind lifts, restless, scattering a handful of snow across the scene like a priest throwing salt over a wound. The river takes what it wants, a coin, a leaf, a memory, and moves on without apology. Somewhere behind me, footsteps scrape against cobblestone. At first, I think it's imagination. Then a shadow lurches into view, a friar, hood pulled low, robes heavy with mist. His sandals slap against the stones as if they're punishing him. He clutches a sealed letter in one shaking hand, the other gripping his cross tight enough to make theology nervous. His breath spills out in frantic bursts of Latin half-prayers, half-apologies. He stops on the bridge, chest heaving. For a moment I see his face, gaunt, pale, threaded with the guilt of a man who's seen the script, but still hopes for a rewrite. Friar Lawrence. I whisper to the night, though he can't hear me. Always too late. Always. He glances over his shoulder, maybe hearing that truth in the wind, then gathers his robes and vanishes across the bridge, swallowed by fog and inevitability. His footsteps fade like ink in water. The bridge of broken promises earns its name honestly. It's old. Roman bones under medieval skin, patched and rebuilt more times than the human heart. Lovers carve initials into its stones, pretending permanence in a city that eats permanence for breakfast. Romeo crossed here once, exiled and heart-heavy, his shadow thinner than his hope. He must have looked down at this same water and thought it would carry him away from everything. But Verona's river is loyal in the cruelest way. It always brings its ghosts home. I rest a hand on the cold railing. The stone hums faintly with the vibration of centuries, as if the bridge itself remembers every footstep that ever crossed it, and everyone that didn't return. Mist thickens, rolling over the span until the far bank disappears. The lamps flicker, blurred halos in a watercolor sky. The world shrinks to sound, the river whispering secrets, the wind turning pages in an invisible book. I listen, and I swear I can hear voices in the current. Romeo's first, all bright defiance and boyish conviction. Then banished is death, Mr. Friar. Juliet's next, softer, full of light she hasn't yet paid for. My only love sprung from my only hate. Their words mix, blur, dissolve into the rush of water. A duet becoming an elegy. I imagine the boy stepping onto this bridge, cloak snapping in the wind, the letter still unwritten, the potion still sealed. He doesn't know the script yet, just that his heart is louder than reason. He thinks he's leaving. The city knows better. Snow begins to fall, slow and deliberate. Each flake spins before it lands, the sky reluctant to let go. I tip my head back and let a few melt on my face. The cold bites, sharp and clean, the kind of purity that almost hurts. The adage moves beneath me, a black ribbon trimmed in white. The surface quivers, catching the lights from the far shore, reflections bending, breaking, reforming. It's all very poetic if you don't think too long about how everything that shines here eventually sinks. I look down at the blood trail seeping toward the water. It's thinner, now fading to pink where the current laps it away. The jeweled pin is gone, stolen by the river, or claimed by it. The city doesn't bury its dead, it repurposes them. A church bell rings somewhere up the hill, 1, 2, 3, the sound stretched and lonely. Across the way, the cathedral's tower tilts into the fog like an old man straining to hear his own sermon. I take a last look at the bridge. The stones glisten under the snow. Somewhere out there, the friar's letter still flaps uselessly in his pocket. Never to reach Mantua, never to save anyone. Verona's tragedy is a clock that refuses to stop, even when no one's left to wind it. The river murmurs. The bridge listens. I turn away. Behind me, the wind rattles through the arches, whispering farewells to no one in particular. Ahead, the road curves toward the city's sleeping heart, a heart that's forgotten how to beat quietly. I walk on, my reflection pacing me in the black water, distorted but determined. Every few steps, the mist parts just enough to show the faint shimmer of the domes ahead. The city's pulse, slow and inevitable. The current tugs at the air like a reminder. All roads, it says, all hopes, all tragedies, they lead back here. And somewhere, deep beneath the water's dark skin, Verona hums its oldest refrain. Love ends where it began. Chapter 6. The Night of the Fallen Lovers. Snow drifts over San Francesco al Corso, like the city is trying to tuck itself in and pretend none of this ever happened. The monastery sits hushed beneath its white hood, stone shoulders bowed, door iron cold beneath my palm. A single bell tolls, once hollow and reluctant, as though even time is embarrassed to be here. Inside, the air is monk quiet. Old wood, candle wax, damp stone. The nave runs long and narrow, pews lined like ribs. Votive candles gutter in red glass cups, each a tiny heartbeat refusing extinction. My footsteps tiptoe down the aisle without permission. Even the echo minds its manners. I pass a fresco with saints whose eyes follow me like disappointed uncles. Yes, I whisper, I'm here after hours. Consider it an emergency. The cloister arches cradle the courtyard, snow dusting the flagstones, melting along the lip of a dry fountain. A stray cat prints scripture across the white and vanishes through a door I absolutely should not follow. Naturally, I follow. The hinges whisper a secret I pretend not to hear. A corridor slopes downward, swallowing warmth by the mouthful. The walls sweat a thin skin of condensation, slick and chill. My breath is visible, proof of life, and a torch on the far wall stutters in its bracket, throwing a nervous carnival of gold and crimson along rough plaster. It smells like damp roses and old candles, like a wedding bouquet left on a grave. Subtle, I murmur to the decor. The decor says nothing, which is wise. At the base of the stairs, the crypt yawns open, low ceiling, thick pillars, and a space in the middle, like a held note. Juliet's tomb rests under the torchlight, a stone sarcophagus sweating tears from its own skin. Someone has left roses. They have outlived their vanity, but not their perfume. The petals cling to the lid as if hoping for an encore. I tuck myself into a shadowed corner, a respectful trespasser. The torch pops, one bright, failing cough of flame, and the room tightens around its flicker. Footsteps, soft, determined, the kind of steps a heart teaches you to make when it has something impossible to do. She appears as if lifted from the stone itself, Juliet, pale as the moon that raised her, lashes wet with the residue of too much fate. She stirs, sucking in a breath that sounds like the world beginning again. Her eyes open, unfocused first, then sharpening. Curiosity, confusion, and then the worst recognition a face can have. Beside her, Romeo, still, the pose of a boy who outran everything except the end. His lips are foxglove blue. One hand curls around an empty vial whose ambition exceeded its contents. The torch throws a tremor of light over his cheek, and for an instant he looks warm enough to wake. Time is a cruel comedian. Juliet reaches with trembling fingers, touches his face. The cold steals the color from her. "What's here?" she breathes, voice fragile as spun sugar. "A cup closed in my true love's hand." The words hang in the air and shiver, as if the crypt itself understands English when grief speaks it. The torch sizzles. Wax crawls down the haft like a slow surrender. Juliet lifts the vial, shakes it, listens for mercy. Nothing. History has already licked the spoon clean. Her gaze lifts, frantic, catching on carved saints whose stone hands pray without lifting anyone. She presses her forehead to his, and her tears fall. 1, 2, beads of salt that chase down his cheek, dot his chest, and vanish into the fabric. The sound is so small it breaks me anyway. "Poison," she says, more to the air than to any witness. "I will kiss thy lips. Haply some poison yet doth hang on them." She leans in with the tenderness of sacrament. The kiss is delicate, searching. It ends with the tiniest shake of her head, the universe's worst quality check. She looks around, mind racing the edges of a broken map. I can see the thought land in her eyes, the decision straighten her spine. There, at her waist, a dagger, like a dark idea. She draws it. The blade winks once, as if pleased to be useful at last. I catch my breath and scold myself for the noise. The crypt scolds me back by being even quieter. "Oh, happy dagger," she whispers. Irony so perfect the gods should pay royalties. She holds it to her heart, and for a heartbeat she is every vow anyone ever meant. The torch flares, a mortal sun. She closes her eyes. The motion is swift, sure, devastatingly human. Her body folds to him as if they were always meant to occupy a single outline. And then the crypt exhales, a gentle release of air, a soft shift in temperature, the sound a room makes when it realizes the story is over. The silence that follows is not empty. It is crowded, thick with everything they said and didn't, every balcony breath, every promise hammered into a future they never owned. The torch settles into a steady flame, calmer now, the way a witness steadies after the worst has happened. I step out from my corner. My boots whisper across stone, careful not to disturb the last choreography of their embrace. Up close, they are terribly young. Romeo with that infuriating suggestion of a grin still softened into his mouth. Juliet with a line of resolve between her brows, as if she has just finished correcting the universe's homework. The roses near the sarcophagus have surrendered their posture. Petals litter the floor in red parentheses. They burned bright, I say, voice barely more than a thread, and left the rest of us to stumble by their ashes. It is not profound, but it is true, and truth earns its keep here. I rest a palm on the stone, cold enough to sting. Moisture beads under my skin, like the tomb is breathing through me. Beyond the pillars, the corridor waits, obedient and unhelpful. Somewhere above, the monastery's wood skeleton creaks at the wind. Snow taps at a grated window with the patience of eternity. There are practical things that will follow. Guards and lanterns, a chorus of horrified relatives, the friar's explanation arriving late to its own defense. Verona will conduct its outrage like a requiem. Blame will reproduce like rabbits, and new laws will be minted that do nothing but shine. But none of that fits here. This is the part of the tale that refuses footnotes. I back away, bowing without meaning to. The torch gives me a nod of light. I take it as permission to go on living. The passage lifts me toward the cloister in a long sigh of stairs, stone gripping my soles, air warming by the inch. When I reach the arcade again, snow is still, falling, fat flakes now, lazy in their descent, as if the sky has switched from weeping to tucking. The courtyard wears its new white solemnly. The fountain holds a soft round in its basin. A single candle gutters by the chapel door, brave and ridiculous. I pause beneath an arch, watching the flakes land on my coat sleeve and disappear, tiny rehearsals for larger vanishings. From the far tower, a bell tolls once, not for the hour but for the heart. Verona hushes. Even the river, just audible beyond the walls, lowers its voice. Love, I think, is a poor negotiator and an excellent arsonist. It takes one look at a rulebook and fashions a match. It makes saints honest and politicians nervous. It isn't safe, and it isn't supposed to be. The best we can do is witness, quietly, faithfully, and then carry the warmth forward without burning down the future. I turn for the gate. Snow feathers the air in a slow fugue. The city beyond sleeps with one eye open, as it always has. I pull my cloak tight and step into the street, leaving behind a pair of lovers who managed, however briefly, to outshine their war. Rest easy, sleepyheads. The path through time never closes. It just waits. I'll see you back in the circle.